Hey everyone, it's Jill from the Wandering Stamper. We are in beautiful Hickory Hammock Equestrian Campground. It's part of the Florida Conservation Land Management. So it's free camping, so we're off the grid, no hookups. Thank goodness we have lots of solar. We are on a beautiful hike that goes out to another campground. So we're just going a couple miles to get Jordy some exercise and of course be healthy ourselves. And now that we're almost done with this, we're going to head back to the stamp room and play with the amazing Irresistible Blooms bundle. Actually, it's the Irresistible Blooms Suite. I think you're going to love this suite of products. The cards are adorable. So follow me on this hike back to the RV so we can start stamping.
Hi everyone, it's Jill the Wandering Stamper here to play around with the Hello Irresistible Suite today. You will absolutely love this bundle of products. I love how Stampin' Up! Coordinates everything. It's one of the reasons why I have been using these products exclusively for 25 years. So let's look at the suite. So first you have the Irresistible Blooms stamp set. This stamp set is so pretty. It has flowers, leaves, and some really nice sayings. It's elegant, it's playful. I really enjoy it. It also comes with the loose frosted dots that are beautifully coordinated with the paper. We're going to use those today. We are also going to use the dies that go with the stamp set. These dies are great because there's some really special elements you don't see all the time in here. It also has the cutout dies for the flowers and the leaves, and the bonus is that these same dies will cut out the flowers and the leaves in the designer series paper. So if you don't feel like stamping or you just want to make a quick card, you can grab your designer series paper and use the dies. As you can see, I've used some here, and they cut the leaves and the flowers out perfectly. So it's another little added bonus with the suites that you can do that. The designer series paper is gorgeous. It's probably one of my favorite papers. I'm not a big flower person, but I really fell in love with this paper. There's 12 different designs on each side, 4 sheets of each design. So you get 48 sheets, and as always with designer series paper from Stampin' Up, it's double-sided. So 12 designs per side, 4 sheets of each design. So you've got a lot of versatility on what you create. You can make masculine cards and feminine cards with this, or gender neutral cards. I can't speak, but it's just, this paper is just gorgeous. I love a good paper. I think that it makes creating your little masterpieces easier because it does so much of the elegant work for you. So look at that. They're just beautiful. So we're going to play with these today. And we're also going to be using this brand new embossing, these basic 3D embossing folders. There's 3 designs in a pack. We're going to use this floral design. There's sort of a, I don't know, texture design, and then there's some dots that are really cute to use. But today we'll use the flower. So these all coordinate nicely with the card we're going to make. We are going to make a variation of this card. And since I always make, well, most of the time I make the standard 4 1/4 by 5.5 cards, I thought I'd be a little bit outside the box today and make square cards. So these measure 5 by 5. And we're going to make a variation of this one. But I also wanted to point out, if you don't have 5 by 5 envelopes or 5.5 by 5.5 envelopes, I'll put a link to this below that will kind of direct you on where to purchase it. But I love this envelope punch board. It makes all these different size envelopes. It gives you the exact card size to make the envelope off of, the paper size that you need, and then where to cut and score the paper. Everything's on here, even the scoring tool to make the envelope. So this is what I use to make my envelopes for this card. You can order card envelopes online if you want, but if you want to just always have a way to make envelopes when you need them in a pinch, this is a great little tool. So let's get started. So I have my paper gathered ahead of time. I'm going to show you a couple of techniques today too, because we have a couple of choices on how we color our images. So first we're going to make our card base. I'm using basic white paper and I want it to be 5 by 10 because like I said, I wanted to make a 5 by 5 card. Now you can do any of these cards I'm going to show you today using a standard card size, the 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. But I wanted to do a square card today, so that's what I'm going to show you. So we're going to cut it at 5 inches. And then we're going to cut 1 more inch off to make it 5 by 10 because this is 8 1/2 by 11 paper. I'm going to cut this off here. And we can use this for a greeting. And then I'm going to put this on the 5-inch line and I'm going to score it. So there's our square card base. Make sure it's all straight. And we'll use our bone folder in a bit. Actually, I'll just do it now and get it done. I love doing that to get the crease nice and tight. All right, we're gonna set this aside. And I wanna make another layer under the card. So I've got way too much stuff in my way right now. All right. So I'm going to do my top layer that goes on top of my base card in Flirty Flamingo, which coordinates with the Designer Series paper. And I'm going to cut this at 4 3/4 by 4 3/4. And I'm going to cut 2 of them because I want to use one for the inside of the card as well. So I'm going to do it this way. I try to cut things in a way that I have the biggest piece of scraps possible for something I might want to do later. 4 3/4 by, excuse me, 4 3/4. And 1 more. Okay. So then this will layer on here nicely, but I'm also going to use it for the inside of the card as well. So we'll set that aside for a moment. And then finally, we're going to use the Designer Series paper. And where did I put it? So you have so much variety of what you can use. I mean, this paper is so pretty. But I think I'm going to do this one. I just really like the lines because we have a circle we're cutting out on the front. So I think the lines gives it just some interest there. So this Designer Series paper, we want to cut slightly smaller. What I do is go down 1/4 inch. So we want to cut this slightly smaller. So this is going to be 4 1/2 by 4 1/2. Four and a half by 4 1/2. Save those scraps for later because I mean, look, that's perfect for another card. So then this piece will layer on here. So we've got 3 layers. So that's all of our cutting for now. So now we're going to do a little bit of embossing on this one. Actually, I'm going to show you, before we do all our cutting and embossing, I'm going to show you the techniques that I wanted to share with you. So there's 2 ways we can create the flowers, this flower for our card. And I'm going to show you 2 ways to do it. I'm going to cut a little piece of watercolor paper. And I have a piece of scrap paper here. So we're going to use these 2. And okay. So there's 2 ways we can do it. So first of all, we're going to emboss our flower stamp with clear embossing powder. The clear will make it so that the outlines of the flower are white, and then we're going to paint it in with the watercolor paper with a brush. I'm going to show you how to do that. And then on the regular paper, I'm also going to show you how you can use a sponge dauber to color it in. So there's two ways depending on your preference. So we are going to get out our Versamark and your embossing buddy. If you don't have this, definitely need it. The embossing buddy takes all the static off the paper so that nothing sticks to the embossing powder but the Versamark ink. So you always want to give that a nice little wipe, and then I keep it in its little bag so it doesn't, I don't know, it just stays nice that way. Okay, so that static is gone. So we're going to get our stamps. I'm going to stamp these leaves and this other leaf and then the flower, the big flower. So you're going to ink up your flower nice and well. I'm going to stamp it here, and I want to make sure I leave enough room for a border because I am going to be coloring outside of the borders here, and you'll see why in a moment. Now I'm going to do the same thing over here on the regular basic white cardstock. Okay, and clean my stamp off. Don't want to leave that Versamark on there. All right. And then we're going to do the same thing with the leaves. Ink them up good. And you want to space them a little bit away from the flower because like I said, we're going to be coloring outside the lines. This is the beauty of this. You can be as messy as you want. Super easy. And then I'm also going to do the smaller flowers just in case I want to have those on there, which I probably will. I typically will. And again, these are the same flowers and leaves that are also on the designer series paper. So if you didn't want to do the leaves, you don't have to. You could actually just use the dies and cut them out and add them to the flower. But we're going to stamp everything today. All right, so these all have the Versamark on them. I'm going to work with the watercolor paper first. I'm going to get my little tray and my crystal clear embossing powder. I actually ran out of white, so this works really well on white paper because I don't have white embossing powder right now. And I'm just sprinkling some of that on there. Give it a little tap tap. I usually give it a little flick too, just to make sure. Set that aside, and then I'm going to do the same thing with this one. Just going to cover it pretty liberally. Tap it off. Give it a little flick. All right, perfect. And then I love this tray because it has a little cork in it, and you can just, I've actually had this particular tray for probably 20 years, but they still sell it, so that's how great it is. Okay. And then any mess I make, because it's inevitable, I'm going to make a little mess. Put that back in there. I mean, this stuff, you can see this is an old crystal clear powder. It just lasts forever. Okay. So that's done. So now we're going to get our heat tool. And heat it up. I like to move it a lot while it's heating up just to keep it from, I feel like it doesn't warp as much, but also it just kind of gets everything moving, melting quicker. So we'll go ahead. I know it's hard to see on the camera, but it's already starting to melt the powder. Now once the powder's melted, it just looks shiny, so that's how you can kind of tell it's done. It's all shiny and textured. And once your gun is hot, like mine is hot now, it goes pretty fast. And I actually have the older style, the one they sell now. It's a lot better. I need to get it. It's got two heat settings, a low and a high, which I like because there are things that you want to use lower heat for. So you definitely want to get one. If you don't have it yet, it's probably going to be the next thing I purchase because I just haven't done it and I need to do it. Now I'm doing the one on the watercolor paper. I love this watercolor paper. You can do so many things with it. And I tend to not, I just don't play with it often enough. And when I do, I kick myself because I enjoy the look of it so much. You can color on it and stamp on it. It has a slight texture to it, so it's just a really neat paper. All right, that looks just about done. Just kind of give your paper a little visual glance, make sure everything looks shiny, and then you know it's all finished. Look at that one. That looks good. All right. Turn the noisiness off. All right. So first, I'm going to show you how to do the watercolor paper. I'm going to use the, done with this. I'm going to use the Flirty Flamingo because that's the same color paper we cut, and I like everything to be uniform, color coordinated. So give your stamp pad a little squeeze, and you end up with all this ink right here. And then this is the aqua painter. It's got water in the base, and the brush stays nice and wet. If you need it to be a little wetter, you just give it a little squeeze. What I do is just prime it up a little bit with some water, just to kind of give it that watercolor look. And look how easy this is. All you do is just paint it on. Just scribble it on. There's nothing fancy about it. Super pretty. And I like to go outside of the lines because we're going to use a die to cut it out. So you want to make sure that your ink is going outside the lines so that everything is pink. So I just kind of give it a nice little brush around the edges, and then pick up some of the darker colors and just splat it. And it's going to give your flower a little color texture. So you don't have the same color all over the flower. So that's it. That's how easy that is. And then to do the leaves, you're going to do the same thing. But first you want to wash it off. So I squeeze a little water in the tip and then just wipe it off. And as you can see, all the color's gone. So now we're ready for the other color. And I'm going to use the Mossy Meadow. Give it a squeeze. Open your stamp pad. Plenty of color. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to just make a little palette and then just brush it over my leaves. Super, super easy, but it's really pretty. Pretty way to do these leaves in a pinch. And there's nothing complicated about it. It just looks like you were very artistic with it. And you can make it as dark or as light as you want by adding more color. And just like the other one, I'll get a couple of pieces of dark color on there just to give it some texture. Okay, that's all done. So then again, I'm gonna just clean this off. I squeeze a little water and then just brush it until it comes clear. So that's all done. Easy, easy, easy. And find my lid, there it is. So that's the aqua painter. And now we're gonna set this aside to dry. And then here's the one we did on regular cardstock. And on this, I'm going to use my sponge daubers. You could also use a brush if you have the brushes. I have one for my red ink and one for my green ink. So all I'm going to do is rub it on here like this until you have the depth of the color that you want. And you can make it as dark or bright as you want. See how pretty that is? It's super, super easy. Look at that, done. And then again, like I did the other one, if you want to add a little extra color anywhere, you can certainly do that. But it's just really pretty. So then I just like to stamp off some of the ink. I don't like to leave a ton of ink on my daubers because I use this for all my greens. All right, and then we're going to do the same thing with the flower. Just going to add a little color and give it a little rub. And you can make this as dark or as light as you want. You can just keep adding color until you're happy with it. And I'm sure this will also work on watercolor paper just fine. I just tend to lean toward the watercolor paper when I'm going to use something wet because it's made for that. Look how pretty that is. It's just super pretty. Now, if you wanted to, you could daub a little yellow in the middle, give it a little yellow if you wanted to, but I'm happy with that. So then I'm gonna just stamp off this a little. That's me. I just like to get some of the ink off of there. Okay, this is done. I have ink on my fingers. All right, so that's done. We're gonna put our ink to the side so I don't make any more messes. All right, and now we're just gonna cut these out. So we're gonna get Stampin' Up cutting and embossing machine. This thing is fabulous. And to cut the dies, you need the #1 plate. I know you're not gonna be able to see the whole thing, but hopefully you can see most of it. And the #2 plate, and then the #3 plates. Okay, so we'll do the watercolor one first. Where are my dies? See, this is what happens when you're in an RV, because you have such a teeny tiny table that no matter how organized you think you are, you can't find anything. Here we go. All right, so we're gonna get our flowers. So this one, I'm gonna do all 3 at a time. Now, if you're worried, this paper, the watercolor paper does bend a little. So if you're worried about it moving, you can tape it down with some non-adhesive or low-tack tape. I have some that I love, and I'll link it below. I'm going to try to do it without today for the sake of time. This is the tape I like to use. We'll actually use a little piece. This is the Post-it tape, and you can reuse it over and over. So if you're afraid of your die moving, you just put a little piece on it like that, and it'll hold it in place for you while you're cutting out your pieces. And then we're going to cut this one. All right. And then slide the plate on top without moving everything. You know what? I'm worried. I'm just going to tape this one down a little, because I can't get a good view without putting my head in your way. So since I'm doing it this way, we'll put a piece of tape on it. All right. Crank it through. All right, so we have our flower. Dropped a die on the floor, typical. All right, so this is our flowers with our watercolor paper. And you know what? I think for the sake of time, I'm not going to cut the other one out, but you get the idea. Super, super easy. Now, while we have our embossing machine up here, cutting, I don't know where my die went, so hopefully I will remember to find it later. We're going to go ahead and cut our designer series paper. So we're going to use this piece here, and I'm just centering it pretty close. It's okay if it's not exact. Nobody's ever going to notice. Crank this through. And look how pretty. So you just carefully take these off, and it makes this nice little delicate center. So we're gonna get rid of all this mess. All right, so we have that done. So we're gonna set that aside. And then I think I wanna add some texture to this. So we're gonna emboss this one with the embossing folder. So I'm going to place this in here. Now it is slightly wider than the piece of paper, or the piece of paper slightly wider than the embossing folder. So I'm going to show you what I'm going to do. I'm going to leave the bottom unembossed because it's going to look like we did that on purpose. I'm going to do that. So then when you're embossing, you're using only plate 1 and plate 4. Put those on there and then crank it through. Embossing folders can bring your paper to the next level. So when you have one that works out well with the design, it's always worth it to use it. So look how pretty. And because we kept this nice and straight, it's fine. It'll look good on the card. All right, so we're going to set all this aside. We're done with this. And now we're going to start assembling everything. All right, hope you're with me still. All right, let's get all of our pieces. So we have our card bases. We have one embossed and one not. We have our front piece, and then we have our flower pieces. And then of course, remember we did this one as well, so you could cut this out and use it. All right, so we're gonna get our silicone craft sheet. The first thing I wanna do is decide, do I want my card to open this way or this way? Either way works. I didn't quite score my card straight, so we're gonna do it this way. Okay, so I think I'm gonna have it open this way. And I want to put my piece of paper so this unembossed strip is down here, because then it kind of looks like we did that on purpose, right? Well, we did do it on purpose, but you know what I mean. All right, so we're gonna do stamp and seal. Get it as even as possible. All right, look how pretty that is. And then I'm going to start working on decorating this piece. Now I notice I have one little dot that didn't poke out of there, so I'm going to use my take your pick tool, pop that out. I think everywhere else is good. All right, so I think on this I want it to be elevated a little. So I'm going to get my dimensionals. Look, even the back of this paper is beautiful. And I'm going to put the dimensionals down using my take your pick tool. It's so much easier. Whoops. Especially when you don't put it too close to the edge, which I just did. It's okay, it comes right off. You've got a second to move those if you don't put them in the right place. It's hard when I have to keep my head out of your view. And I'm sure it's probably in there a little bit. And I like these to be even because they're going through the millimeter. And you don't want it all mushed up. All right, take all these off. I like to do this part and then build the front of my card. So now I'm gonna put this down as even as possible. See, now you have a little dimension, okay? And now we're gonna decide where we want our flower to be. I'm gonna do it that way. So I'm going to use, I think I'm gonna use a little liquid glue. And I'm gonna just put a little here. give it a little hold for a second, and then I'm going to put a little dab on each of these because I'm going to tuck them under wherever I decide to put them. So I think I'll put this one here. And you just don't want it to go past the edges of the white because you want it to fit in your envelope. Look how pretty that is. I mean, it's beautiful just like that. All right, now the other thing I want to do is, remember I had that watercolor paper, and the reason I'm going to do this with watercolor paper is because I want the textures to be the same, but we're going to go ahead and stamp our greeting. So I'm going to use, I really like this little hello. So I'm going to use that, and I'm going to stamp it in the petal pink so that I keep that continuity. And I would normally use this on my scrap of, oh, here it is. I do have the scrap. Couldn't find it for a second. Okay, we'll use the scrap. I'm going to ink up and stamp it in my scrap. Okay. And then I'm going to take my scissors and just fussy cut around it. But see, I made the other one with white, with the basic white cardstock, but because I used the pieces of the watercolor paper for the flowers, the textures just didn't quite match. And I don't think the person who got it would ever think anything of it, but you know how it is when you know it's there and you could be better. You want to do it better the next time. So that's what we're doing. So I just cut that out. Get this paper ink out of the way before I make a mess. And then I'm going to just put a couple of dimensionals behind it. So put one here, and then use my sticky scissors and use a piece of this because it's smaller. So you could even use the edges of your dimensionals that you might think you'd throw away. I use them all the time because they're a different size. And sometimes you need a different size. All right, so that's that. We're going to go ahead and take my hair off of it. Decide where we want it. I'm going to put it right here. Let it hang off a little. Look how pretty. Okay, now I'm going to flip it up, open, and we're going to add the inside. But before I do that, I like to stamp on it because it's inevitable. I might mess it up. So I'm just going to use tone on tone. I'm going to do I like you. I think that goes nicely with the hello on the front. Stamp that on. Perfect. See, when I'm on camera, I can get it right. But when I'm off camera, most of the time I get it wrong. Okay, that's done. So now we're just going to put some adhesive on there. All right. Make sure our card is facing the right way. Look how pretty. So pretty. All right. And then the last thing we're going to do is add, oh, these are so pretty. I just feel like there should be music that goes, oh, every time you open these. I really like sparkly things. Can you tell? We're going to put a little glob of glue here, and then I think here and here. These are not adhesive backed, so you have to use your own glue. And the liquid glue works really well. So I think maybe I'll do the pink. So take your pick tool. One end has a putty tip, which I love because, you know what, I think I'm going to do the yellow because it's easy to grab those little guys right out of there. So we're going to do one there. And there's 3 sizes. So I usually like to just fish around and get different sizes. So here's the medium one. Put it right there. And see if I can fish around for another size. Here's a small one. So I've got small, medium, and large on there. Oh, and I even put it upside down. Flip it over. All right, come on. It helps when you pick it up the right way. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to call that card done. It was really easy. As I said, if you didn't want it to be square, you could certainly make this 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 and it would work out just fine. Here is the card we just made. Who wouldn't love to get this in the mail? Here's one I made earlier. Again, it's a 3 by 3. I used the watercolor paper and colored it. I cut out a different embellishment, used a different designer series paper. Absolutely gorgeous. This says, "I couldn't be happier to have you as my friend." Really, really sweet sentiment. Here's another one I made using the same die, but I used regular paper and then put the designer series paper behind it. I cut the actual designer series paper out for the leaves and the flowers. So I didn't stamp it all on this part. I actually just used the designer series paper. And then I colored, you can't tell on camera, but I did color the flower in with Wink of Stella to give it a little shimmer, and then added some embellishments. I used the tag punch to create this little piece here, put some white string on it, cut out another small flower from the paper, and it came out really pretty. And then I did use a stamp here. So that's a really pretty card. And then here's one I used by creating an embossed base. So I embossed the base of the card. Then I added white to the next layer and I cut it significantly smaller. I think it's an inch, a ½ inch smaller, maybe an inch smaller. So a ½ inch on each side smaller, just so I could give it a lot of visual effect. And then I cut a designer series piece of paper in 1 inch, 1 1/4 inch, I believe, increments, and just created some spacing. And I used dimensionals to pop it up, stamped on it, and added, this is a texture stamp that's in the stamp set. So I kind of made this one for a thank you card and left the blank inside so that I could write my own message. So I mean, there's so many things you can do with this paper. So there's that. And then there's one I made earlier using the yellow, the Daffodil Delight paper, which also coordinates with this designer series paper. So it's a beautiful stamp set. It's a lot of fun. It is a special stamp set. It's not anywhere in the catalogs. This is an online, my mind is escaping me, an online exclusive stamp set. So this whole suite is an exclusive stamp set from Stampin' Up. You can't buy it in the catalogs, but it is available online while supplies last. It is on back order right now, but they do expect to have it stocked again very, very soon. So keep your eye out if you're interested in it. I will put the cutting dimensions for this card on a link below, as well as a link to my online store. Please let me know what you think about these cards, and if you like this video, please like and subscribe so you can find out when my next video will be posted. So I hope you have a wonderful day. I'm going to go out wandering. It's a beautiful day for a hike now that it's finished raining, so I will see you later.